भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमिड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः. Namaste and welcome to our Sunday talk on mind management techniques, wherein over the last 3-4 sessions we have been exploring the idea of self-empowerment in our emotional and ethical or moral dimensions of our personality through integration with our Atman nature or the self. In all our spiritual teachings, in all our scriptures, the concept or the ideal of the Atman or the divine is taught first, because that is something missing in our everyday education. And in different faiths, according to the realizations of saints and sages and incarnations of God who come for the specific purpose of imparting that spiritual knowledge, as well as the means and methods by which we can have that experience, those are the subject matter that are discussed. And those who are spiritually inclined, in those people who have those samskaras, as we say, or previous tendencies from previous lifetimes, which resonates with those higher spiritual teachings, such people will be attracted to these teachings, so to say. They enjoy it, they feel comfortable with it, they engage with it. In others, they listen and it, as they say, goes over the head. Somehow that connection does not happen. And it does, all that credit cannot be given to what's happens in this lifetime. Much of it comes from our previous lifetimes. So if we are spiritually disposed, or we have inherited from our previous lifetimes spiritual tendencies, Devi Sampatti, then according to where we were in the previous lifetime, we continue in this lifetime. Anyway, then the idea of the Atman or the self or the divine resonates with us, and we have this spiritual inkling or spiritual pull, so to say, in the tug, and we begin to move forward in that direction. So this understanding or conception of God or the divine depends on our conception of ourselves. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he says, man's conception of God depends on his conception of himself. Let us start with ourselves. Let us not start with some divine being living in the clouds, who is the common childhood stories we have conceived of him as a being out there, who might be very nice, it can be very harsh also, who commands and demands our love, so to say, and he's got his favorites, so to say, those who believe in him, and he is nice and generous to those who are good and very, very harsh to those who are not. That type of kindergarten, primitive type of conception of God does not take us very far in this world where everyone wants a rational, logical understanding of God that makes sense, that we can relate to. So why don't we start with ourselves? Swami Vivekananda says, the old religion said he's an atheist who did not believe in God, that God out there. The new religion says he's an atheist who does not believe in himself. Of course, we all believe in ourselves to different degrees, but that's the platform that we stand on. But our conception of ourselves could be a very, very human conception, very organic, in the sense I'm this body, I'm this mind, this bundle of emotions in there, and there's a sense of I and identity and personality, and all this bundle, the basket that we make of ourselves is what we are. Some of us like it, some people don't like themselves, so to say. But this I just say, look, this is only the mask, the facade, so to say. personality. This is your personality. The word personality comes from Latin word persona. Persona means the mask. In the olden days, when actors performed on stages, they would put a mask on their face to depict a particular character. That means they themselves were hidden, the character was being projected. And out of the word, this personality came. So the personalities that we have are really the masks that we put on, which hides our true self, the Atman nature. So if you want to know yourself, then we have to unmask ourselves. In other words, we have hypnotized ourselves that we are a body and a mind and an ego and all that. The process of dehypnotism has to come. And to remove this false idea or misapprehension of ourselves, we have to bring in the light of knowledge, the light of knowledge of our true spiritual nature. So everywhere you will find that this Atman is talked about first. And we have to drill this idea deep, because this idea of ourselves being a personality, a body-mind complex, is so deeply ingrained from childhood through our every thought, word and deed by ourselves and by those around us, that we think really and truly that is what we are. And here comes somebody, a spiritual teacher, and says, my friend, all that you have understood yourself to be as a body-mind complex is not really your true ultimate self. Temporarily, you have taken this body, so to say. At some point, it will fall off. But your permanent identity is a divine identity, your Atman nature. So this process of educating ourselves spiritually and developing a clear, crystal clear conception of what this Atman could be. Remember, it's going to be a conception only. It won't be a realization and experience, but that conception will take you towards the next stage. It will impel you to the next stage. So the clearer the conception, the smoother journey is. For example, if you wanted to go from point A to point B and one had a map, and if you studied a map that had all the details, then the journey could be very much smoother. But if it's very vague and hazy, then we could be wandering out here and there, wasting so much time. So we use our intellect, the searchlight of our intellect, our internal understanding and conceptualization, to build up this concept or map of what we really are. And so the scriptures are the guides to us. And the realizations of people who traveled the path, who have completed the journey and came back to tell us, you can come along this path and we are happy to show you the way, they could be of great benefit to us. They are the spiritual teachers, the people who will dispel the darkness of spiritual ignorance. Guru. Gu means darkness, Ru means to remove. They carry the light of knowledge. So that knowledge, the Atman nature, is the fundamental part of our being. So we are not trying to bring a foreign idea into ourselves. Actually, we are trying to resonate ourselves with our higher truth. And it will appeal to those people because such is the very characteristic of truth. If you tell somebody, look, you are the very essence of purity and beauty, and within you is a wonderful source of infinite knowledge and infinite bliss, and you are immortal, I don't think I would come across anyone who would say, no, I don't believe that, I don't like that idea, it's a foreign idea. Because somehow at the core of our being, that is what we feel. We might not be able to experience it. We are trying to do that. And somebody comes and tells us that whether you know it or not, that is what your true nature is. He says, I like that. But if we say, you have to believe in this book or this prophet, and this is, no, that does not resonate with me because of my cultural and religious upbringing. So let us go back to ourselves. Man's conception of God depends on his conception of himself or herself. So what is this Atman nature? The more we dwell on it, the more we meditate on it. So the meditation classes we are having on Saturdays, we are trying to introduce that idea that behind the physical body, behind the mental body, behind the knowledge body is that infinite ocean of consciousness, which is the Atman. And in that ocean of consciousness, we visualize a divine presence, a light, which is the source of all beauty, purity, goodness, knowledge, and all those things, and which is an omniscient, omnipresent being whom we can personalize as a personality, which will be our conception of the particular God, but He is a living God, a human God. We can pray to Him, He'll respond to us, and we develop a relationship with Him, and we find that through that relationship, there's a flow of energy and power and awakening and goodness and grace, and you felt empowered because there is somebody behind you who's your well-wisher, who's protecting you, guiding you, and all that. So therefore, that becomes a living idea of God, a living God inside, not outside, not in the temple, not in the statue, not in the photo, not in the clouds somewhere. He is your own higher self. So when we meditate on Him on day and night, pour the whole mental energy onto it, intensify that mental energy. This intensification of the process is what accelerates our spiritual growth, so to say. You see, like we said, if you go out in the sun and put a piece of paper, it will warm up, nothing more will happen. But if you use a magnifying glass, what you do is you concentrate that light to a focal point, and if that focal point is touching the paper, it's the same heat, but now it has become intensified, so to say, and the temperature will rise to set that piece of paper on fire. Not that more light came. All that we did was we used a tool, a intermediary, so to say, which concentrated that light onto a point. So this within us, there is this spiritual energy flowing out, but is sort of dissipated here and there. What we need to do is, through the process of meditation, is concentrate that mental power onto a point. And that point is not outside, but within us. Of course, a scientist does the same thing. He uses the power of concentration and he pours that mind on this object of his study, and nature reveals itself, whether it's an atom or this or that, all those things. Wonderful discoveries happen. Einstein, Newton, all these people had that wonderful concentration of mind. The spiritual seeker says, I too have a mind, and I will develop that power of concentration, but instead of directing it outside, I'm going to direct it inside. And that too should do some magic, by which that inner darkness of spiritual ignorance will be removed, and I too will experience myself as some being or some entity which is called the Atman. But in the beginning, I should know that there is something, otherwise where should I focus that light on? So the scriptures help us in that direction. So it says that, look, behind all of us is that ocean of consciousness, penetrating everything, whether it's incarnation of God, where the light shines in all its beautiful glory, or in various gods and goddesses in various divine planes, heavens, or among human beings here, or even the lower life forms, whether it's a stone or mineral or bacteria or virus, everything right from the smallest blade of grass to the highest Brahma in the Brahma Loka are manifestations of that same being. The difference is that the manifestation of the power or that consciousness is more in the higher beings and less in the lower beings. It's a difference in the manifestation, not in the kind. We are all made of the same substance. So all of them, all the waves are made of the same water. Some are bigger waves, some are smaller waves, but waves, water in all of them. So that is a very empowering, beautiful idea. We have unmasked ourselves slightly, at least intellectually. No longer we feel miserable that I'm I do not know where I have popped into this world, where I'm going to go when death is coming. What's the meaning and purpose behind all this suffering that we go through? All those type of things fall away. As you bring in the light of spiritual knowledge, the darkness will automatically disappear. Swami Vivekananda says, let the lion of Vedanta roar and the foxes will fly away. All these foxes which are troubling us here in the form of various fears and worries and anxieties and concerns, constantly nibbling us because we have reduced ourselves to some miserable little entity. We are like a sheep, not knowing that we are a lion. But suddenly, that lion, which was appearing to be a sheep, you have to manifest the power. Then people will recognize you and keep away from you and not disturb you. So when it roars, and suddenly all these foxes will disappear because he is a lion there. So likewise, within us, this Atman nature has to roar. Now, what does it mean, roaring of the Atman? That means every now and then we have to remind ourselves what we really are and act on that, based from that knowledge. That means we don't behave ourselves as a human being anymore. What does it mean to be divine? Imagine if we are a realized person here and now, then all those beautiful qualities that are being enumerated in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads as the qualities of a realized soul, they are not just there that one fine day you will suddenly acquire all of them. We will practice them now, and through that practice, those qualities will begin to manifest and grow and grow and grow until they become infinite in the ultimate realization. But as we go through that process, you will feel that awakening step by step. It's just like when you approach a fire or a light that's kept in a dark place. It's not that you are in total darkness and you become in total light at one point. It's a 0 to 1 type of thing. No, as you approach closer and closer, the light seems to be brighter and brighter and brighter. It's not that light is suddenly became brighter, but our coming closer increases the intensity of the light to us, basically. We are changing. The light is not changing. So when we are approaching God, not that God is showering more grace to us. He is impartial, constant all the time. But our approaching Him sort of envelops us with that greater light, and we feel that presence around us and that warmth and the power and all those type of things. So we have to awaken this ideal of this Atman. How? Anything that you pour your whole mind and soul into it, we have discussed this in the past, we energize that idea and make it into a living thing. And when it becomes a living thing, then it also responds from the other side and also and inspires us. Whether it's you're trying to become a professional in something or anything that you become very passionate about it, every time you're thinking about it and it suddenly is no longer an indifferent idea there, you develop a desire for it, the next thing you are actioning it and you're on the journey and you are reaching it. It could be something small that you want. I want to buy a car or go to a particular place. But when we pour our whole mind into it, that idea will translate into action. Likewise, this Atman idea has to be awakened, so to say, by constantly reminding ourselves of our true nature. So as soon as some form of weakness comes, and weakness comes because of ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of all misery. What type of ignorance? Spiritual ignorance. So the moment any form of weakness comes and it makes you miserable, worrying, whether it's fear of death or some suffering, you bring the counter idea of our true nature and assert that I am that infinite being, the eternal and immortal one. The body will go. It happens to an ordinary man, it happens to an incarnation of God also. Both of them cannot keep the physical body. It's the very nature of anything that's created to, after some time, to disintegrate and go back to its original causes. So, but that does not matter because I have realized and understood, at least intellectually, that there is something that is immortal in me. The moment you bring in that idea of the immortality of the soul, the foxes of fear of death disappear. But if that idea is not there, then the foxes are sitting on your shoulders and troubling you incessantly. So this is how we empower ourselves at all times. So whenever a problem comes, there are two approaches. One will try to change it objectively. We think the cause of the problem is out there. Therefore, we have to go and change it. It could be the society, it could be the environment, it could be the people around me, it could be the weather, and all those type of things are there. That is, every time we try to attend to that, we are disempowering ourselves. The other approach is, I'm going to change myself. I'm going to make myself so strong that even though the problems are there, they are insignificant for me. And this is the spiritual path. Swami Vivekananda says, the philosophy of Vedanta, what does it do? It teaches us the true nature of the world so that the world cannot hurt us. It does not change the world and make it into a beautiful heaven here itself. This world is perfectly suited for the purpose it was created for. And the purpose is to wake us from this sleep that we are human beings and to drive us to the ultimate goal that we are divine beings. Because if everything was beautiful here, then we would say, this is it. May I continue coming here without any suffering and everything, and let this life go on, and maybe even I can live forever. But that would be a very degraded state of existence compared to the Atman nature that we have. So this world is constantly trying to wake us, so to say, wake us up from this illusion, this delusion, this hypnotism of this transitory nature of the world. So this consciousness of the Atman, or the Atman consciousness is there. That's empowering us. And whatever we achieve in this world, whatever we do, is done through the power of that Atman. So the first concept was to introduce this idea of this Atman, and it's a very empowering, beautiful idea. The more we dwell on it, the more better we feel about ourselves, to this extent that, so this is the test of whether this idea or the conviction of our Atman nature is really getting some solid anchoring and driving some strong roots into our understanding, personality. That you'll operate from that new foundation. So if you say the Atman is the most beautiful thing, and everything outside which appears to be beautiful, so to say, is only a pale reflection compared to the beauty of the Atman. The Atman is a source of all bliss. And all the little happiness that we get from our sense enjoyments and everything is very, very insignificant compared to the infinite light of this bliss that's inside me. The Atman is full of purity, beauty, goodness, and all those type of things. The more we understand or drive this idea of my inner glory, the less we will depend on outside things to validate what we are. You'll find out that in the absence of this inner anchoring in beauty, we are constantly trying to get our validation of what we are from the outside world. And so much time and energy and effort is wasted in that process. Think about it. A person who knows his own divine glory doesn't seek any validation from the people around him, the society and the community, to tell him you're a good person. No, I understand I'm the very essence of goodness. You don't have to tell me that I am good. A flower that flowers in the forest where no one is seeing it doesn't require any people to come and tell the flower that you are so beautiful. It is aware of its beauty irrespective of whether people come and tell it or not, whether anyone sees it or not. Such should be our idea, that I don't require any validation from anyone outside. It's a very, very empowering idea. In the absence of that idea, you see, we require constant validation. We do things and expect somebody to praise us. And if they praise us, we become happy. And if they don't, then we become miserable. And we want to look beautiful because we think that this beauty has to come from outside. It's not something internal. And what beautifies me? Well, I think I'm the body. So the clothes that I wear, the brands that I have, the jewelry or the cosmetic, or the hairstyle, or the shoes and everything that I have, they are going to add to my beauty, because somehow I feel we are insufficient within, we are not complete, and we need these external things to complete that process. And no matter how much we put, that shortcoming will always be felt. So it's just an effort in vain, wasted effort. Can we save ourselves all that trouble? Yes, if we can just introduce this idea of the Atman. So when that comes, how does it change the person's behavior? Well, you see, he doesn't try to go around and win the appreciation and the liking of people. Such a person doesn't do something, has a nice meal in a restaurant and puts it on WhatsApp or whatever and sees how many people are liking me. If a lot of people like me, I feel so happy. If they don't, I feel miserable. I have made myself a slave to other people's opinions. That is not freedom, that is slavery. Why? Because at the core of our being, I do not know I am the source of beauty and power and goodness. I seek that from outside. Well, see, Vedanta, spirituality doesn't mean simply sitting in a place and meditating and all that. This is practical Vedanta, applying that idea in our everyday life, so that our thoughts and words and deeds are now influenced, colored, tempered by this Vedantic knowledge of our divinity. That is something that we all have to put into practice. And if that is happening, now we are indifferent to what the world, so to say. I have simple clothes that give me comfort. How does it look? It doesn't matter. I'm wearing it for myself, not to show it to others. I have simple food and all those things. That much I will pamper this body and simple food, clothing and shelter. The rest of the time that I'm going to save, I am going to engage that into the higher pursuit of spiritual knowledge. If that is there, whether my friends like me or not, the old friends company falls away, I don't care. I don't require that validation. This indifference to the world is the science that the importance of the world is fading away from our value system. My value of who am I depends on my inner nature, not on the outside world. That is a huge transformation. Try to put this Vedanta into practice, and if you can do that, a lot of problems will fall away automatically from your mind. All those things that by which we have tied ourselves, which are constantly tugging us, and one moment lifting up us and making us feel very good, and next moment dragging us down. Why does it happen? Because we should not blame those people. It is we who have empowered them by surrendering our freedom to them, and then we become playthings, and we jump up and down as they tug on the on us like puppets. We are there. They are not to be blamed. We have surrendered our freedom, and we also have the power to reclaim that. And when we do that, you yourself will feel empowered. You say, the world says anything, say, I don't care, so to say. But it's not like indifference and insensitivity. You are more sensitive to the inner ideal, and this ideal does not in any way hurt others. It is not callousness, roughness, insensitivity, but it is more being centered in within than outside, so to say. So this is how we can channelize the flow of this emotional energy within, not outside. When it is given to the world, then it drains us. Okay, love the world, love this, love that at a physical material level. The world will suck all that energy away from you, and at the end of the day you find you are an old person, deprived, drained out of all things, and retired away somewhere because you don't serve any purpose to them anyway. You find all that cases around there. Maybe a little bit of cosmetic, nicely described, but the essence of that is there. When that same emotional energy is directed to the people outside, but rerouted through the divine source, then it becomes an empowering, self-empowering flow of emotional energy. For example, Vedanta does not say, do not love your family members, community members, people around you, in the name of religion or God pursuit. In the Upanishads, Sage Yajnavalkya teaches his wife Maitri, he says, the husband loves the wife for the sake of the Atman in the wife, not just for the sake of the wife as a physical person. Means everything is now spiritualized. This love that is there is spiritualized in the sense of that oneness, that I am that infinite Atman, that which is present in my heart is present in every other being, and that oneness is the pull that is attracting me. But most people in ignorance of that Atman nature feel that a personal physical attraction, which can get degraded down to a very lustful idea. So whether we understand it or not makes a lot of difference. If we see there's a attractive person and I like that person and enjoy their company and like to spend a life with them, or this is my family, have all those things. If it's a very physical human type of relationship, then it's a cause of great happiness also when things are all good, and that same thing can be a source of great misery. A lot of people will have that particular experience. After some time, all the initial charm and everything fades away, and life can be very miserable because nothing is permanent in there. Maybe that person also was not like that. We superimposed our idea of beauty and all those things on that person, and when we wake up to the reality, then we find it's not as beautiful as it was. That person is not to be blamed. Our ignorance of the truth was the cause of our misery. Now, if we attended this through in the light of Vedantic knowledge, how do we love the whole world? Through a spiritual love, through the Atman. That strength, that understanding will be anchored in the higher truth, because that is the source of attraction. not the human side, because the human side is all very temperamental. Today it's one according to the mood of the person, likes and temperaments and all that. They're constantly changing. The physical beauty, everything will fade away. The whole thing is changing. So you can't, you're not standing on a very permanent foundation when we engage with the world through our love to this, to the world directly. We have to do it through a spiritual sense. So, what would be the implication of it? The mother now still loves the child, but maybe even more, knowing that the divine dwells in the child. And that's why she loves and cares for it. But then it's a very impartial, universal type of love. It's not centered on my child only, because that same Atman dwells in my neighbor's child also, and dwells in everyone. Therefore, I can love everyone now through that idea of oneness, irrespective of external differences that might be there. And that's the empowering power of this idea of oneness that is behind the many. But this is the test. So when you go out there in those community and you find differences everywhere, the initial reaction is a very superficial reaction, that we judge somebody based on how they look. It could be the color or the cultural or religious, differences could be there, or it could be their views and thoughts and all those things. And that which resonates with us, my type of people, my kind of people, we love them immediately and we like them and we respond and deal with them in a different way. And those that do not align ourselves, then they are different, and that can be indifference. It could be something even more gross, where you express yourself that could hurt somebody, or it could be violence also. See, that ignorance of that idea of our spiritual oneness can bring out that devil, so to say, in men. And how to remove that is to bring in this idea of knowledge. This is the universal application of Vedanta. We have not talked about any God, we just talked about man and his divine nature and divinity of man, oneness of existence. These are the two pillars of Vedanta. That man, behind this facade of this personality, is a wonderful being. And there is only one being, one ocean that's manifesting as various waves. And the waves will appear and disappear. There could be a billion waves on the surface of the ocean, or they can all disappear. It does not make any difference. The existence of the ocean remains, and the sun in the sky will also remain. But when the waves appear, each wave will reflect the sun in its own way. And this is how all these differences, jivas, beings, have come into being, whether it's a small little ant on the earth, or it's the God in the heaven, in the higher spheres. All are different manifestations of the same power. We want to go to the cause, the source, and be identified with the ocean itself, and look from the ocean point of view. And what does the ocean say? All these waves are part of me. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Even if all of them are removed, it does not make any difference to me. I am always there. I create, I play with them, I draw them. Why do I do it? I like it. There's no cause, and I should not be forced, because I'm ever free being. That is the perspective of the soul that has realized the truth. For him, this miserable world of terror and everything disappears, and it's transformed into a mansion of mirth, as Sri Ramakrishna says, a big playfield. The divine is playing with himself. It's not playing with somebody outside there. We are all parts of that same being. So, in the absence of that knowledge, then all these problems out of ignorance appear. So, this emotional development we're talking about, how do we strengthen the emotional dimension of our personality? We talked about physical strengthening, knowledge plus exercise give us strength. We talked about intellectual dimension of our personality, conceptual knowledge, subject matter plus exercises gives us the mental muscles by which we can solve our problems. And also at the spiritual level, the spiritual knowledge and exercise through spiritual disciplines of japa and meditation in the various yogas brings us in us that awakening of the spiritual knowledge. Then we said these two other dimensions that are equally important in man, the emotional and the moral and ethical, these two are not systematically developed. Can we work out a method of developing them so that we are strong, healthy in all dimensions of our personality? That would be the total wellness package, so to say. And can we work out a method by which we can achieve that? Then we said that yes, that can be done, but first we understand that the source of nourishment and the power and the energy that all of these levels derive come from the very foundation of our true being, which is the Atman nature. And that is the source which has got infinite existence, knowledge, bliss, etc. And the more we are connected to that, the more we can draw out of that and nourish ourselves at each dimension of our personality, the healthier and stronger we will be. So far, it makes perfect sense. We have not talked about any external source. This is a self-empowering methodology. We're not going to some outside person and say, I've got a problem, can you please solve this for me? Give me this, give me that. Every time we do that, we become dependent on that. It could be dependent on the person or dependent on the substance they give, and we call that as an addiction also. Either way, it is disempowering to us. So we're taking the Vedantic approach and say, first we build up that conviction and confidence and the deep faith, what is called Shraddha. In Sanskrit, it's called Shraddha, faith in ourselves. It's a difficult word to translate, but it's a deep conviction, so to say, that's actionable. It wakes up an idea that draws us to that. It's an energy. It's not simply an idea, but it's an energy, so to say, that impels our mind and effort into that particular direction with a lot of reverence and attraction. Shraddha is that. Shraddha to the knowledge, Shraddha to the idea of this Atman, Shraddha to the sources of that knowledge, which could be the scriptures or the teachers, because then we open our mind to that. We question, but it's not a superficial questioning for the sake of arguing only. It's a questioning in the spirit of seeking knowledge and trying to understand something. At the same time, recognizing our own limited capacity to understand. So when the teachings come and it doesn't make sense to us immediately, we don't brush it away and say, this is all nonsense. No, we understand that if we want to teach the theory of relativity to a child in class 5, and he says he doesn't understand, therefore it's all bogus. No, he understands that I don't have the capacity now. I have to develop my training so that my mind is ready to make sense of that knowledge. It's not the fault of the knowledge or the teachers of that knowledge, it's my incapacity. So he approaches those teachers with that humility to help to get the training and help from them to develop his capacity to assimilate that knowledge, and one day it will make sense to him. Likewise, spiritual teachings are there. They belong to another dimension, very high and very subtle. It doesn't necessarily make sense to us immediately. That's why even the human language is not designed, the conventional language is not designed to express ideas of those subtle truths. That's why the teachers try to teach in various ways through parables and stories, and at best they can give us some hint. And we should not, if we don't understand some concept, think that this is wrong. We should not judge immediately. On the other hand, the approach should be, okay, maybe my mind is not ready yet. It hasn't developed a degree of concentration in purity. Let me work on myself. And if I can do that, that truth will reveal itself. But if somebody can help me in that direction, I would very much appreciate that. So one approaches the teacher with humility, or the source of that, with that humility, with that openness, and you'll find that when the mind opens to that, with the Shraddha, the knowledge soaks in, so to say, and expresses itself. So here are the spiritual teachings of the Atman nature, which is also manifesting itself as all these powers. When we talk about this Atman, it's a consciousness, is not like light out of a bulb, okay, which is just a passive light. There's no emotion in that. It's not a living light. No, the Atman is a living power. It's energy, it's power, it's consciousness. We have to understand that in a different way. Just like a living person is different from a dead body, the living person responds and talks and actions and smiles and blesses and all those type of things he does. Likewise, that consciousness is also something like that, but much more than in a human being. That's why when Swami Vivekananda went to Sri Ramakrishna and asked him, have you seen God? And Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, I have seen him, but in a more real sense that I am seeing you. I am seeing you as a limited manifestation of that power. In that state of being consciousness, that entity is more living than the life in the forms that we see around us. So what would be that tremendous power that we are trying to approach? So it's a energy. Energy flows. Energy flows from one level to another level. Okay? It's like heat flows from a higher temperature to lower temperature. Air flows from a higher pressure to lower pressure. Electricity flows from a higher potential to a lower potential. Knowledge flows from a higher source of a teacher to a student. Money flows from a higher source of a rich man to somebody who is needing it. So a potential difference is necessary for a flow to happen. The direction of the flow has to flow from the higher to the lower. If we, through our spiritual understanding, have identified the higher flow, higher source within us, which is the Atman nature, and connect ourselves as the jiva or the lower mind, so to say, to that, then what happens? The flow comes from the Atman into our being. But if we say the Atman is not inside me, I am the source, and the world is outside there, then what happens? The flow happens from us out into the world. And we are not connected to that infinite source of power, so to say. We are just like one of those batteries that we buy from the shop, and as it's used more and more, it keeps on drained, and after some time it becomes flat. It's not like you're plugged into the power source. So the Atman is the power source, and if we can plug that ourselves, then we can draw as much as we want depending on our capacity. What is that capacity? What is that prevents millions of thousands of amperes to flow from the higher voltage to a lower voltage? It's called resistance, impedance. Okay, that depends on how thin the wire is, whether it's a good conductor or not. And so this, in human being, what is that resistance that prevents the flow of that spiritual energy from the Atman source to the human level? What is that makes a difference? As Ramakrishna says, this I and mine, this ego itself is that resistance. Okay? And as this ego becomes less and less and less, as the resistance becomes less and less and less, imagine we have managed to make it zero. What is that piece of material called? It's called a superconductor, in which there is no resistance, and when there's no resistance, the energy flows as much as you want, so to say. And you see all these great souls with the Buddha and the Christ and all this, they had these things. They had obliterated and removed this ego into them. The ego disappeared. In Samadhi, the ego disappears. And what happens? Then the blast of energy flows from that Atman Brahman into that being. And you see that wonderful manifestation of spiritual knowledge and beauty and purity. Such is that power that, look, like I said last week, here is this carpenter's son, who preached this beautiful idea to a handful of people. Of them, only 12 could make some sense out of it. The rest did not understand it, and others crucified him. Yet that power that he unleashed onto this world traversed down 20 centuries, influencing, uplifting millions of people and bringing them knowledge and spiritual solace. Such is the power of those spiritual giants, the Buddhas, the Christ, the Krishna, the Rama, the Ramakrishna. Long after they are gone, the real impact of their teaching hits the world long after they're gone. Let me give an example. If you are in Calcutta and you go to sit on the bank of the river Ganga, it's a very wide river, almost a kilometer wide. In the middle of the river, this big ship goes. Okay. And you can see it's moving down in the middle of the river. Long after the ship has almost disappeared from your view, the waves will come and hit the bank. And you'll see the tremendous amount of commotion it will create on the bank. So you'll see during the time when we see these spiritual giants in their own lifetime, we don't see much impact of the life. But after they have gone, disappeared, physically they're not there, then we can see the impact of that power that they have released onto the world, and there is that awakening in men of spiritual knowledge and all those type of things. So this power is there. It's an energy, it's a flow. It flows from a higher source to a lower source. If we do not bring the ideal of God or Atman nature into us, then we ourselves think we are the source. And from me, that energy flows to another source, which will always drain us. You're constantly giving out, so to say. Unless we can replenish that source by connecting ourselves to another higher source, so we become an instrument and a channel through which it flows. You see, that is more beautiful and empowering. It's not that we don't want to give it out to the people or share it with others, but we must connect ourselves to a source through which it has to be supplemented and supplied constantly without any limit. So you see, Ramakrishna says, I'm only an instrument of God. That's what Sri Krishna is trying to teach Arjuna. Don't think that you are the source of that power and activity and energy and everything. But you are only a nimitta, an instrument. Know that behind you is the Atman, which is the real source, or the Paramatman, the divine that dwells in the heart of every being. All actions, thoughts, words, and deeds start from there, flow through there. The human being is in the middle only as an instrument. This body-mind mechanism is there. Just be an instrument without any impedance, so to say. But if in that human organism, body-mind complex comes a very strong, high ego and begins to feel that I am the doer, then what happens? Instead of thousands of amperes, you will have trickling down of milliamperes, a little bit of light coming there, a little dim something is there. So what's the difference between great people? The great people are there who are ever mindful of that cosmic power behind them. And they open themselves and give all the credit to that direct source and say, I will just be a good instrument. Through me, let that power flow. Never take credit for that, anything, just being an instrument. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, Ahamkar vimodhatma kartaham iti manyate. A deluded person, vimodhatma, kartaham, thinks, I am the doer. Why? Because a sense of ego comes, I am the doer, kartaham. Where does it come from? Vimodhatma. Means he is deluded about the fact that he is not the source. The source is within us, the body-mind complex of the human being, as well as the little ego that we feel within ourselves, is the channel through which reduce that ego, less and less and less. The path of devotion is where we say, the Atman is the Supreme Being, He is the Lord, I am the servant. Whatever I am is because of the divine that's behind me. I'm just a channel, and constantly he tries to maintain that relationship with them. So when that energy flows, it can flow through him, but now it's a spiritual energy. So love, kindness, compassion, and all those type of things that we say is our spiritual energy, emotional energy, is now sublimated, purified, spiritualized, and is connected to an infinite source. And that is how we see in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He says, I can love everyone because I see God in all of them. In the most elevated ones, the best of his disciples who were very, very pure in body and mind, who would see the divine, as well as those people where that manifestation was not so high. He would say, my divine mother alone has become the 24 cosmic principles in all living beings. He was ever mindful and aware of that fact of the presence of the divine in everything. And he operated and interacted with the world based on that knowledge. What's the difference between him and other people? Well, we are not aware of that knowledge. We don't have access to that experience. He had that experience. So how do we benefit from his teachings? Well, we understand that there's more to what the senses reveal to us. Okay, there's more to what our education system has taught us, that we have been only scratching the surface of this ourselves in this world in a very, very superficial way. And the sooner we give up this effort, only then we can direct this energy to that higher source. So we educate ourselves spiritually, conceptually, about who we are and what is the world. Secondly, we want to make that idea alive and living. Okay, how do we do that? By pouring our whole energy, emotional, intellectual energy into that one idea. Swami Vivekananda says, take one idea, think about it, dream about it, sleep on it, let it course through your body and mind, let it flow through every cell of your body. And then that idea will wake up and energize you, and that's how great works are achieved. Great things are done. What is that idea that we want our own divine nature? What is more beautiful than that? What is so more, even the more you think about it, everything in the world pales away into insignificance, just like the beautiful moon at night pales away into insignificance when the sun rises. Let the sun of this Atman nature rise in our mind, and all these beautiful moons that we see outside, which are only reflecting the light of the sun, they don't have any light of their own. Likewise, everything outside reflects the light of our Atman nature. They are not luminous on their own. We give them, we empower them, we make them beautiful. The beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, as they say. So more we understand that, and then we take that power that we have given to the world back into ourselves, and I will decide how much the world will have a say in my thought process, and dictate to me my thoughts, words, and deeds. That is self-empowerment. And I will operate through this world now, deal with this world through the spiritual channel. So I will still love people, feel kindness and compassion, and try to help them, knowing that it's not really helping. I'm just only an instrument. The power in the divine is flowing through me. And it's but when it flows through me, it purifies me. That's a beautiful thing. You know, when the water flows through a pipe constantly, it keeps the pipe very clean. But if it doesn't flow, then all the junk begins to accumulate on the walls of the pipe. So I will be as clean as a whistle, as they say. Let it flow without any resistance. And what's the beauty of that? Then this jiva, in time, as this I sense becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, or as the mind becomes purer and purer and purer, will ultimately realize that really the two are not one. Two are not different, but really one, because the difference has been removed. They look different because there was something blocking them. Now, if that is removed, then the two are one. And that is how the idea, the jiva realizes his identity with Shiva. So, this is the idea. Swami Vivekananda put in another beautiful way. Shiva Gyane Jiva Seva. Know that every being is the embodiment of the divine, Shiva. These jivas that look like apparently people out there, beings, animals, plants, and animals, are really different manifestations of the divine principle called Shiva. And now I am going to engage with these apparently jivas, really Shivas, in this way. And that one idea will transform my approach and my relationship with those beings. No longer I feel that I have done some great thing by giving them something, and I should expect a thank you and some appreciation or something. No, that happens when you begin to give it to somebody lower and expect a response of appreciation. But if you take that person from that lower level and put him up there, that you are not a jiva, an ordinary being, but you are Shiva now, then my approach to you is of reverence and prayerfulness and appreciation and gratitude, because you have given me an opportunity to worship. So then it becomes, it's a privilege to be able to worship this living God around me in all these forms. How do you apply it? Vedanta is very nice, it's a philosophy. How do you measure that? Well, look around and you see there's so many wonderful opportunities for you to worship this living God. You'll find it in your neighborhood. Somebody is requiring some food or shelter, some education, if nothing, somebody to talk to, listen to, something like that. In so many ways, one might not have money to give, but one might have so much knowledge to give, some education. One might have a patient ear to lend to somebody. In so many ways we can engage, but always not out of pity, but out of as a spiritual service. And the purpose is not to really help that person. That is also a part of it. But this is self-purifying for me. Through these thought, words, and actions, I am trying to assert and establish that oneness, which is the fundamental principle at the core of our being. But here also I am trying to have this idea of that oneness. And you will find that the more this idea of oneness is there, that means it unites. It could be two people becoming one, getting married, or a family, we are one unit, or my extended family, my community, my neighborhood, my state, my country, my whole humanity. So you'll see this urge for oneness is there, deep inside, behind this whole humanity. It manifests in different ways, where all this type of increasing degrees of oneness, even these ideas of United Nations. What is it? It's a oneness of nations. Somewhere we feel that we are all one humanity, and the welfare of one is dependent on the other. We might have our own nations and all these borders and this like that there, but really ultimately we are all human beings. And the more we can assert that oneness, the greater, more civilized we will be as a humanity. So in times of crisis, the true colors come out. And you'll see in this type, all these wonderful ideas of United Nations and all this type of things that we are one. The moment there is a risk to self-interest, then all the selfishness will come out and say, hey, look, you are different from me. This is my community, this is my state, this is my country, we are going to lock the borders, we don't want you. All those superficial sentiments disappear. They are all very nice, so long it serves the purpose of people, politicians and all those type of things. But really, if it's well and truly ingrained deep into the psyche of mankind that we are one and interconnected and interrelated at all levels at all time, then that idea will manifest itself even in challenging, difficult times. Then that is the test how civilized we are as human beings. So this Vedantic idea, concept of oneness is a fact, is a reality. How much we can understand that, how much we can apply it in our own personal lives, and how it can spread out and its fragrance can spread out in affect and influence those who are around us. To that extent, we are a blessing to ourselves and a blessing to all around. And in that sense, we are progressing spiritually. We haven't talked about God. We haven't talked about any ism. We haven't talked about any theology and philosophy. We've talked about man and his divine nature and how as mankind we are connected and interconnected, and how we can apply that knowledge, make it practical to grow spiritually as well as contribute to the spiritual growth of mankind. That is the challenge. We'll come back to this idea a little bit later again, not next week, because we have a Krishna Janmashtami the following week, and we'll see how we apply this idea at the moral and ethical level. The ideas of oneness and divinity of men can make us more moral and ethical, because those are the foundations of all spiritual growth and development. Until then, keep safe, meditate, listen to the spiritual teachings, read the spiritual books, chew the cud, contemplate and try to get the essence of the teachings, and in your own station in life, family, workplace, fashion out, design the solutions, your own practical solutions where these principles can be applied. It will differ from people to people, and there's not one solution to all, but the principle is common. Applications will differ according to time, place, situation. And you are the best person to design your own solutions to empower yourselves to put this practice teachings into practice and feel that goodness and that energy and the awakening of the Atman power within us. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.